Wherever we are on our spiritual journey, love is highly recommended. And today's topic, love renews our soul. The essence of love is self-givingness in order to express life. And this is true whether we're talking about divine spirit, that creator and maintainer of all life, or whether we're talking about ourselves in our life journey right here on planet Earth. Love is a topic of this month's talks, and today I've chosen to talk about how love renews our soul. For those of you who have been in Science of Mind for a while, you know that the word soul is interchangeably used in our philosophy with the word essence. And so whenever you hear me say the word soul, if the word essence is more comfortable for you, you're welcome to use that. I want to tell you about a young boy named Scott who decides to go hiking alone to commune with nature. Although he was a mite young to be consciously recognizing that this is one way we renew our soul, our essence, through the love of God's creations. And this, in fact, was what manifested for him each time he went out to walk in nature. So Scott is walking along this narrow pathway on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The waves are pounding on the rocks below, and he is watching them because he is so interested in this whole process, and he's not really watching where he's stepping. He gets too close to the edge, and he slips. He finds himself hanging by his hands from the branch of a little tree that's growing about 10 feet down from the top. In fact, it's growing sideways out of that cliff. And it's about 100 feet above the rocks below, and it's a sheer drop from here to there. So he yells repeatedly for help, but to no avail. No one is near enough to hear him, and he's out of sight below the top of the cliff. He's in what's commonly known as a predicament. Finally, in desperation, Scott calls out into the sky, "Is there anybody up there?" And a great voice booms out, "Yes, Scott, I am." "Who are you?" Scott shouts. "It's me, God. I am all. I am that I am." "Help me," the boy calls. And in response, he hears the great booming voice again saying, "I'll help you. Let go of the tree." "What?" "Trust in me. Let go of the tree and I will help you." There's this long, silent pause. And finally, Scott calls up again into the sky, "Is there anybody else up there that I can talk to?" Well, we may not always choose such a challenging way to feed or to renew our soul, but surely you recognize a bit of the flow of life in this piece of humor. We often find ways, like Scott did, to commune with the creative force in the universe, but when called upon to trust in it, believe in it, and use it, we sometimes try to find another way or another person to lead us out of our dilemma. Reverend Lloyd Strom, whom you've heard me refer to frequently, and you've heard me use this phrase again, he puts it this way. He says, we must strive to learn to pray out of inspiration instead of desperation. We can take our lead from this young man, Scott, and learn to plan our life's journey with a bit more attention to the things which pull us off our path. Or, when crisis is upon us, we can learn to be inspired by and trusting in the help which is always available, rather than so desperate that we even mistrust it. So, what is soul? And how does love renew it in us? Dr. David Walker, a well-known leader in science of mind, wrote an article in the Creative Thought magazine a number of years ago in which he said, "We're attracted to this teaching because the science of mind speaks to our souls, our essence. And by soul, I mean the very essence of our being. The very essence of our being." Dr. Ernest Holmes, in his many writings of science of mind, addresses this issue of essence again and again. He talks about the universal soul, which is a whole talk unto itself, and he talks about the individualized soul as that part of our mental being which is subjective or beneath the level of our conscious mind. What this means, of course, is that our soul is fed, replenished, and expanded by what we put into it. It becomes then our internal perception, our self-knowingness. I really like that internal perception, which is another way of referring to your subconscious, only you're lifting it a bit from the sub into perceptive. It's subjective to conscious thought, and it's compelled by reason to receive what's put into it. That's both the good news and the bad news, because when you are putting positive into it, as you heard in Standing in the Light a few moments ago, then that's definitely working. The reverse also works. So we then choose carefully to be certain that what we put in is positive. Well, what does that mean altogether when it's not something already formed, shaped, and cast in concrete? Does that mean it's not something permanently structured? That something that we can mess with or mess up? And that's exactly what it means. Your soul takes the thoughts of your conscious mind and acts upon them. It doesn't analyze, it doesn't reject, it can only carry out the directions your conscious mind gives it. It's infinite in its power and ability, but it makes no independent demands and draws no independent conclusions. Here's an example of what I mean, and this is the metaphysical story of Adam and Eve. The metaphysical story of Adam and Eve is the story of the journey of the soul. So if they experienced a fall, it was actually a fall upward into consciousness. Until Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, as the story goes, they were aware, but they were not self-aware. Self-awareness is a stage of awareness that we must go through to arrive at the cosmic awareness, so that we may revisit the garden, as it's called in that story, and partake of what's called the tree of life. We evolve through our Adam, or our Eve, human nature into our Christ nature through a series of choices. The journey of the soul is a journey from innocence to enlightenment. Lee Bowman and Terence Deal, in their book titled Leading with Soul, caution us about trying to put someone else in charge of your spiritual journey. Instead, they urge, recognize the trust and the power within you. It doesn't matter how long your spirit lies dormant, or even unused. One day you hear a song, you look at an object, you see a vision, and you feel its presence. Your spirit can't be bought, traded, or annihilated because its power comes from within. No one can steal your spirit or your soul, your essence. You have to give it away. You can also take it back. You can reclaim your soul. Renewing your soul is the same as nourishing your soul. We do this through love. Love of activity, through music, for example, through beauty, through recreational activities, travel, reading. We do this through the love of time for reflection, time to rest, time for rejuvenation. You notice I didn't mention time crammed with stress, demands, and obligations. We do this when we opt for love, faith, trust, goodness. And if sometimes it seems that you are, in metaphysical terms, eating of the forbidden fruit, to coin a very old phrase, allow yourself to look at what you're doing, how you're feeling, or what you're thinking. Observe rather than judge. Is this something that is contributing to your self-awareness? Is it moving you along the path of enlightenment? Is it nourishing your soul, your essence? Is it perhaps the thing you need to do to reclaim your soul, that core of your being? Listen to the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson. Place yourself in the middle of the stream of power and wisdom, which animates everything that floats upon it, and you are impelled to truth, to a right and perfect contentment. Listen to the words of Robert Browning. Our purpose is not to create, but to loose this imprisoned splendor. The words of Eric Butterworth in his book Spiritual Economics. Butterworth reminds us that the kingdom of heaven is within us. It is not a place out in space, but an inner potentiality of imprisoned splendor, which can only be released through each individual person. There's an old Sufi story which has been told repeatedly in many spiritual traditions. I just found it in Andrew Harvey's book, The Way of Passion. There was a man who lived in Istanbul, a poor man whose house was tiny. His only possession was a narrow, broken-down old bed. One night as he lay in his bed, he dreamed vividly of a great new treasure. In a courtyard, through a door, he saw a pile of blazing jewels heaped up by the side of an old man with a beard. In the dream, a voice told him an address. Number 3, Stassen Poluis, Cairo, Egypt. Now, he was in Istanbul. Because he had learned enough to trust his visions, he went on a long, arduous journey to find number 3, Stastampolis, in Cairo. And one day, many years later, he came to that very doorway, entered through it into a courtyard, which was full of light, and saw the old man from his dream sitting on a bench, just as in his dream. The poor man went up to him and said, I had a dream many days ago, many weeks and years ago, and in the dream I saw you, sitting exactly where you're sitting now, and I saw this great heap of treasure piled next to you. I have come to tell you my dream and to claim my treasure. The old man smiled. gave him a hug, and said, "How strange. I had a dream last night that under a bed in a poor house in Istanbul, there was the greatest treasure I have ever seen." In that moment, the poor man saw that what he had been looking for all these years was really under his own bed, in his own heart, at the core of his own life. You see, when we allow love to stir our heart with self-acceptance and appreciation, we are renewing our soul. When we demonstrate that love of self through creativity and external expression, outward offerings of expression, we're renewing our soul. When we recognize and participate in a personal relationship with God, we're renewing our soul. When we are moved to express love to one another, guess what? We're renewing our soul. And when we realize that our greatest treasure is under our own bed, in our own heart, at the core of our own life, we are claiming our soul, that very essence of our being. This, then, is how we loose the imprisoned splendor, as Robert Browning said, that we let love come out and play. Dr. Holmes reminds us that we're made out of a pattern of perfection, you know. There is a perfect pattern, and we believe in it. This perfect pattern is where we are, and not somewhere else. It's already within us. This is the divine incarnation. Notice he said incarnation, not reincarnation. I want to expand on this because it's key to our understanding of our own growth in consciousness. To incarnate is to endow with a human body, to give form to, and there is another definition of incarnate, believe it or not. These definitions are in the dictionary, so you can check them out if you want to. Incarnation is any person serving as the embodiment of a god or spirit. So, as I see it, that's got to be a great relief for a large number of us. We actually are a divine incarnation. You don't have to create the pattern. You don't even have to conjure up perfection, which is something we do sometimes get kind of hung up on in the science of mind. Trying to be perfect, quote unquote, or trying to understand that why someone is doing something or looks like what we don't consider perfect. We can kind of get hung up on that sometimes. Reverend Scott Desnew, who is a Science of Mind minister back in the Midwest, says peace begins when we consciously fall in love with God. God is in all things, and all things are in God. We must not wait until people change before we love them, because they may not change to our specifications. Each person in our lives is on their own path. Divine Spirit is in their paths, and their path is in Divine Spirit. So we must love them right where they are. That is where love begins. That's where peace begins. Because when we love and are peaceful, the universe reflects that back to us. A young man called Scott Kellickstein, who I've spoken to you about before, lives in Encinitas, California, and he wrote a song. He wrote actually the music, which he named Light in the Soul. And you'll recognize these words to it because I've shared them with you before. and the words are not his originally, but the music is. When there's light in the soul, there's beauty in the person. When there's beauty in the person, there's harmony within the home. When there's harmony within the home, there's order in the nation. When there's order in the nation, there is peace in the world. And he calls that light in the soul. So this then is where we begin. From the inside out. We light the flame of truth within our own soul. We feed it with the fuel of love and renew it by acknowledgement and appreciation of all that divine spirit provides for us to grow and to expand. And this extends outward from us into our home, into our neighborhood, into the community, the nation, the world, and into universal consciousness, which is the Christ consciousness. Dr. Holmes wrote, "We really cannot afford in imperfection for a single second. To do so is to doubt God. It's to believe in a power apart from God. That is, to believe in another creator. Instead, he suggests, speak these words to yourself daily. Perfect God is within me. Perfect life is within me. I bring this forth into expression through me. God is expressing life through me." So let me say them again, and perhaps you'd like to repeat them after me. Perfect God is within me. Perfect God is within me. Perfect life is within me. Perfect life is within me. I bring this forth into expression through me. I bring this forth into expression through me. God is expressing life through me. God is expressing life through me. So you see, when we accept the universal presence, this universal essence as our own, we have opened our awareness to that point where we are now feeling and nourishing our soul. When we allow love to stir our heart with self-acceptance and appreciation, we are renewing our soul. When we demonstrate that love of self through creativity and self-expression, we are renewing our soul. When we demonstrate, recognize, and participate in a personal relationship with universal presence, we are renewing our soul. When we're moved to express love to one another, we are renewing our soul. And when we realize that our greatest treasure is under our own bed, that is in our own heart, at the core of our own life, we are claiming our soul, the very essence of our being. And so it is. Thank you.